When McLaren unveiled their revolutionary carbon fiber race car in 1981, they accidentally started a materials revolution that would reshape Formula One. The technology worked exactly as promised. Driver deaths plummeted and performance soared. But this carbon fiber revolution turned F1 into the billionaire playground and eliminated almost all private teams. How did that happen? Today, we'll find out. By 1978, Formula One had a body count that would make a war zone blush. In the previous decade alone, the sport had chewed through drivers like a wood chipper. Francois Sever torn apart at Watkins Glen in 1973. Ronnie Peterson crushed at Monza in 1978. Gilles Villeneuve launched into orbit at Zolder in 1982. From 1969 to 1978, Formula One killed 13 drivers in races or practice sessions, more than one per year. The problem was aluminium. Every chassis was built from aluminium alloy monocoques that crumpled like beer cans in severe crashes, offering drivers little protection. The era's ground effect aerodynamics made things worse, requiring ultra-narrow chassis profiles that weakened structural integrity even further. Enter John Barnard, an English race car designer who was fed up with strapping drivers into what he called aluminium coffins. Physics had backed him into a corner where thinner meant faster but also deadlier. His solution sounded certifiably insane: build the chassis out of carbon fiber composite, a mysterious black material that aerospace nerds used for spy planes and moon rockets. The resistance was immediate and brutal. Veterans called it black plastic and predicted a carbon car would crack like an egg at the first crash. Even Colin Chapman declared that a full carbon chassis simply would not be safe enough for Formula One. Their fears weren't unfounded. In 1975, a carbon fiber wing support failure had launched Graham Hill's car into the crowd, killing 4 spectators. But Barnard had glimpsed the future. Working in California on Indy cars, a contact at British Aerospace had showed him carbon fiber composites with strength-to-weight ratios far beyond aluminium. Carbon fiber offered tensile strength of up to 3,500 MPa compared to aluminium's 300 MPa, while weighing 60% less. The mathematics were compelling to say the least. In 1979, Barnard joined upstart team principal Ron Dennis. Dennis possessed the rare combination of technical vision and business ruthlessness needed to back such a radical gamble. He said, "You tell me what you want to do technically and I'll get the money," Barnard recalled. Dennis basically handed him a blank check to pursue the impossible. The challenge was existential. Who could actually build this thing? In 1979, there were no racing composite shops. Through American contracts, Barnard found Hercules Aerospace in Salt Lake City, a shadowy company developing composites for US military missiles. There was one problem. Their carbon fiber research was classified top secret. During the Cold War, the materials were considered as sensitive as nuclear technology. Ron Dennis spent months sweet-talking Pentagon officials, assuring them that Formula One breakthroughs wouldn't compromise national security. In early 1980, Barnard finally flew to Utah with a quarter-scale chassis model riding in the seat next to him, looking like he was smuggling alien technology. The Hercules engineers had to invent a new branch of materials science dealing with racing loads that aerospace rarely encountered. They created a chassis from 5 large flat panels bonded together, cured in autoclaves that cost more than most racing teams' entire budgets. By late 1980, the first carbon fiber monocoque in Formula One history was complete. Stealthy, black, gleaming with revolutionary promise. In March 1981, McLaren unveiled the MP4/1 with the fanfare of a nuclear weapons test. The car looked deceptively conventional, but beneath its skin lay pure revolution. An entire survival cell made from a 5-piece of carbon fiber composite, weighing a fraction of aluminium yet offering tremendous rigidity. It was like building a Formula One car around a fighter jet cockpit. Mechanics tapping the black panels remarked it sounded eerily hollow. Rival teams eyed the car with suspicion, still convinced the first heavy crash would reduce it to expensive powder. Even John Watson, McLaren's lead driver, admitted feeling like a test pilot / crash dummy, carrying revolutionary technology on his shoulders. Early results were modest. The MP4/1 missed the first 2 races while development continued, then suffered the usual teething problems. But on July 18, 1981, Watson drove it to victory at the British Grand Prix, the first Formula One win for a carbon composite car and McLaren's first triumph in 4 years. Suddenly, Barnard's plastic car didn't seem so flimsy. But the real vindication came at Monza in September 1981. On lap 20, Watson's McLaren snapped loose at 140 miles per hour, spinning backward into an earth embankment with sickening violence. The impact was so savage that the entire rear half, engine, gearbox, suspension was ripped clean off and hurled back onto the circuit. To everyone's astonishment, he not only survived the 140 mile per hour impact, but climbed out and walked away from what should have been a fatal accident. The carbon fiber cockpit had done exactly what Barnard designed it to do: stay rigid and intact while the rest of the car disintegrated. Within days, the paddock's attitude underwent complete reversal. Word spread rapidly through aerospace and defense circles. Videos of Watson's survival were even used by Hercules to show the capability of carbon plates to US military a little later. NASA sent McLaren an official commendation recognizing advances directly applicable to spacecraft safety. The carbon revolution had begun, and there would be no turning back.
They came back with the possibility of being based in England.
After Watson walked away from that Monza wreck, Formula One experienced something unprecedented: instantaneous technological panic. Every team principal on the grid suddenly realized they were sending drivers into battle with inferior weapons. Within months, a frantic scramble ensued as every constructor desperately tried to adopt carbon fiber chassis or face extinction on both performance and safety grounds. The conversion happened with breathtaking speed that bordered on hysteria. Teams that had spent months ridiculing McLaren's plastic car were now throwing money at aerospace suppliers and begging for crash courses in composite construction. The fear was existential. No sponsor would back a team using obsolete aluminium tubs after seeing what carbon fiber could do. Insurance companies began asking uncomfortable questions about driver safety, and team owners faced a stark choice: evolve or die. By 1982, Lotus, always technological pioneers under Colin Chapman, introduced the Model 91 with a carbon composite monocoque. Ironically, Lotus had actually tested the first carbon chassis in Formula One with their controversial twin chassis Type 88 in early 1981, but that radical design was banned on technical grounds before it could prove itself. Now they were playing catch-up to McLaren's breakthrough. The British teams moved fastest, leveraging their proximity to aerospace suppliers. Williams and Brabham developed carbon tubs by 1984, while even small outfits found ways to incorporate carbon components, often by outsourcing chassis construction to specialized suppliers at enormous cost. The economics were brutal. Where a skilled welder could fabricate an aluminium monocoque in a traditional workshop, carbon fiber required clean rooms, autoclaves, and technicians with aerospace training.
Terrible! Drives like a pig.
Oh, you can't say that.
Why not? It's a Ferrari!
Ferrari initially resisted the change with characteristic Italian stubbornness. Enzo Ferrari was notoriously old school and deeply suspicious of non-metal chassis, dismissing carbon fiber as a fad that would pass. Ferrari persisted with aluminium longer than anyone, suffering some devastating lessons in the process. The tragic death of Gilles Villeneuve in 1982 and the near-fatal crash that ended Didier Pironi's career that same year underscored just how dangerous aluminium chassis remained. Reality finally forced Ferrari's hand. By 1983, the 126C chassis incorporated carbon fiber elements, helping the team clinch the Constructors' Championship that year. While Ferrari hired John Barnard himself in 1987, Maranello finally got its first all-carbon chassis with the revolutionary 640 in 1989. That car, featuring both Barnard's carbon tub and his semi-automatic gearbox innovation, won its debut race and proved that the Master's magic worked just as well in red as it did in silver. From giants like Ferrari to minnows like Tyrrell, everyone had made the leap to carbon by the decade's end. The wholesale switch happened so fast that aluminium monocoques became extinct in Formula One in less than 5 years, faster than any previous technological revolution in the sport's history. This rapid adoption created an unprecedented boom for composite material suppliers, transforming sleepy aerospace contractors into the kingmakers of motorsport.
Carbon fiber, carbon fiber, carbon fiber, carbon fiber. Carbon fiber.
Prior to 1981, Formula One had been a small customer for specialty materials. Suddenly, teams needed autoclaves costing millions, carbon cloth by the ton, exotic epoxy resins, and expertise in advanced laminate construction. Hercules Aerospace continued working with McLaren until the team established its own in-house composite facility. Rival teams formed partnerships with other specialists. British Aerospace assisted several outfits, while Courtaulds in the UK and Hexcel in the USA became major suppliers of carbon fiber pre-preg materials, sheets of carbon fabric pre-impregnated with resin that could be shaped and cured by teams. But the biggest winner was Toray Industries of Japan, a textile company that had heavily invested in carbon fiber since the 1970s as part of Japan's strategic focus on advanced materials. While Western suppliers struggled to scale production quickly, Toray had spent years building manufacturing capacity for what they correctly predicted would be a growth industry. Japan's methodical approach to carbon fiber development meant that by the 1980s, Toray was producing some of the highest quality fiber in the world. Their Toreika carbon fiber cloth and unidirectional tape became the gold standard for Formula One teams demanding the strongest, lightest materials available. Japanese competitors like Toho and Mitsubishi also capitalized on the boom, shipping advanced composites to European racing teams desperate for any competitive edge. The competition drove rapid innovation. Toray's T800H fiber, introduced around 1984, boasted 5,590 MPa tensile strength, roughly 15% stronger than earlier T300 grades. These improvements weren't just commercial rivalries, but geopolitical contests. During the Cold War, carbon fiber was classified as a strategic material, subject to export controls, since the same lightweight, strong composites could be used for intercontinental ballistic missiles, stealth aircraft, and nuclear centrifuge rotors. The US, Japan, and Europe each wanted technological dominance in this critical field. By the decade's end, Toray held commanding market share, supplying not just Formula One teams, but also Boeing, Airbus, and other aerospace giants with advanced composite materials. But this technological arms race fundamentally altered Formula One's character in ways that few anticipated. The rapid shift to carbon fiber created massive barriers to entry that killed off the sport's entrepreneurial spirit. No longer could a resourceful private entrant buy a Cosworth V8 engine, bolt it to an aluminium monocoque built in a small workshop, and compete for the World Championship. Carbon fiber required aerospace-grade facilities and expertise that only well-funded organizations could afford. Teams needed clean rooms for composite layup, autoclaves for curing that cost millions each, and engineers with specialized knowledge of fiber orientation and resin chemistry. The price of admission to Formula One went through the stratosphere. Historic privateer teams that had formed the sport's backbone began struggling or folding entirely. Ken Tyrrell, who had won multiple championships in the 1970s with cars built in a modest workshop, watched helplessly as his team became uncompetitive. The cozy Tyrrell factory that had produced Jackie Stewart's championship-winning cars was ill-equipped for advanced composites manufacturing. By the 1990s, most privateer teams had either died off or been absorbed by major corporations. New teams that attempted to join the grid often underestimated the technological and financial requirements. Outfits like Coloni, Andrea Moda, and Pacific appeared and disappeared quickly, many unable to design and produce proper carbon fiber chassis from scratch. The garage-built approach that had characterized Formula One's early decades became impossible in the carbon fiber era. And, by the way, I've made an entire video about the origins of Formula One teams. You should check it out. And if you've made it this far into the video, don't forget to subscribe, as I'm trying to break through 35,000 subscribers by September. Subscribe!
People look back on the F1 and say, it was a very clever car because it was the first carbon car, but actually it wasn't really. It was just Formula One technology, purely Formula One technology applied to a road car.
Formula One's carbon revolution escaped the paddock like a virus, infecting every industry that valued performance over cost. Supercar manufacturers watched Formula One's carbon revolution with intense interest, recognizing that the same weight-saving benefits that made racing cars faster could transform road cars. In 1980s, both the Porsche 959 and Ferrari F40 incorporated Kevlar and carbon composite elements in their bodies, tentative first steps toward full adoption. But the true watershed came in 1992 with the McLaren F1 road car, designed by Gordon Murray and explicitly conceived as an F1 car for the road. The McLaren F1 featured a complete carbon fiber monocoque chassis for its passengers, the first production car ever to do so, and a direct descendant of the technology that had saved Watson's life 12 years earlier. It was no coincidence that McLaren led this transition. The company had never built a race or road car without a carbon chassis since Watson's Monza crash, having perfected the technology through constant competition use. The McLaren F1 went on to set speed records and achieve legendary status, largely thanks to its ultralight stiff carbon structure that allowed unprecedented performance. By the 2000s, carbon fiber had become standard equipment in the supercar world. Ferrari, Lamborghini, Porsche and Bugatti all began using carbon fiber monocoques or body panels to reduce weight and boost performance.
Carbon fiber. Carbon fiber. Carbon fiber. Carbon fiber.
The Mercedes-McLaren SLR in 2003 marked another milestone as one of the first mass-produced carbon fiber chassis cars, built in the hundreds rather than dozens. Today, virtually every hypercar above $1 million relies on carbon fiber passenger cells. The trickle-down has even reached normal road cars. BMW invested heavily in carbon fiber manufacturing for its electric i3 and i8 models in the 2010s, producing thousands of carbon passenger shells for mainstream vehicles. The cycling world experienced an equally dramatic transformation. Tour de France viewers in the 1970s watched riders on steel-frame bikes that weighed over 10 kilograms. By the late 1980s, those same riders were increasingly mounted on dark, futuristic carbon fiber machines that weighed half as much, a direct parallel to Formula One's materials evolution. In 1986, American cyclist Greg LeMond won the Tour de France on a partially carbon bicycle, the Look KG86 marking the first time a carbon-framed bike had won cycling's most prestigious race. The revolution accelerated through the 1990s as carbon fiber enabled bicycle manufacturers to achieve incredible lightness while tuning stiffness for optimal power transfer. By 1998, Marco Pantani's Tour victory on an aluminium bike represented the final gasp of metal frames in professional cycling. Lance Armstrong's 1999 win on a Trek carbon bike ushered in total carbon dominance. Since then, every Tour de France winner has ridden carbon fiber, and the technology has trickled down to weekend cyclists worldwide. Aviation represented carbon's most ambitious leap. While military aircraft had used composites since the 1970s, civil aviation remained conservative until Formula One's safety demonstrations changed perspectives. The breakthrough came with the Boeing 787 Dreamliner in 2009, 50% composite construction by weight, with entire fuselage and wings built from carbon fiber. There was poetic symmetry. Aerospace had given carbon fiber to racing in 1969, and by 2000, racing had given aerospace the confidence to trust the material with passenger lives. Global production grew from hundreds of tons in the 1970s to over 100,000 tons annually by 2020. But every revolution devours its children, and carbon fiber's conquest was no different. Unlike aluminium, which could be recycled indefinitely, carbon fiber composites were essentially immortal waste once their useful life ended. When carbon fibers are combined with epoxy resin and cured at high temperature, they create permanent matrices that cannot be uncured. Formula One teams produce staggering amounts of carbon waste. Top outfits use 8 to 10 chassis tubs per season, plus hundreds of wings, brake ducts and components. After crashes, carbon fragments are swept up and discarded. The material's safety-critical nature prohibits reuse of potentially damaged parts. Global carbon fiber waste now exceeds 62,000 tons annually, projected to reach 500,000 tons by 2050. Only 20% gets recycled through expensive processes that often degrade fiber quality. At least 35% ends up in landfills, with the remainder incinerated or stored indefinitely. The environmental irony is staggering. Carbon fiber was introduced partly to make vehicles lighter and more efficient, yet manufacturing it is hideously energy intensive. Producing 1 kilogram can generate up to 20 kilograms of CO2 emissions, a fundamental contradiction for a sport under pressure to demonstrate environmental responsibility. Carbon fiber enabled a throwaway culture unthinkable in earlier eras. Recent efforts show promise, but highlight how long issues were ignored. McLaren and Mercedes experiment with recycled carbon components, while Formula One introduced cost caps to restore competitive balance. But these represent reactive measures to accumulated problems rather than proactive planning. The bitter irony remains: the material introduced to save drivers' lives created environmental and occupational hazards that may ultimately harm more people than the racing accidents it prevented, especially in a sport that is now aggressively marketing net zero credentials.